Let's take a look at what you're doing this week in class. We're in Module 5, the final week of the term, and what we're doing here is trying to get a more big picture view of the things that we've been looking at. How are all these different things relevant and how they might tie together? We have our brief overview of the week along with the weekly objectives and the checklist of activities. You have a brief overview of the learning materials and your video lecture for the week. The general readings that you have are fairly light this week, so you have Chapter 10 from the OpenStax textbook that talks about biotechnology, a slideshow on specialized cells, a link here for reading scientific articles effectively because that is going to be relevant for one of your assignments, the link for the 4 key questions in bioethics, which is the same link that you had last week. One of your assignments this week is on neurodegenerative disease. You have some links here that give you some information about neurodegenerative diseases. And this is your link to the article for one of your assignments. For your discussion this week, you're going to be looking at neurodegenerative disorders. Your initial post is split into 2 parts. In your first part, you'll take a look at these links for information about Alzheimer's, which is a type of neurodegenerative disease. In addition, you want to research some other information about Alzheimer's. When you complete your research, you want to answer these questions in your initial post. And for each of these, you also want to make sure that you provide supporting evidence and some in-text citations. Please keep in mind when you're providing supporting evidence, you want it to be something that's data-driven. You don't want just a general statement. You want something that actually shows evidence from those articles. In part 2, you're going to take a look at this link here, looking at drug approval and the ethics of desperation. We all know that drugs have to go through FDA approval before they can be used, and you put yourself in a situation where perhaps there is a drug that's available, but it hasn't gone through that approval process. It's having you think about some of those types of considerations. We know that we want to have good scientific evidence for the efficacy of a drug, but we also know that sometimes we may not have the luxury of waiting for all of those studies to come in. What do we do in those situations? That's your initial post. In your response post, you're going to look at 2 of your peers, look at what they have put out there, and then identify differences between what you found and what they found, and answer these questions to 2 of your peers. In your week 5 assignment 1, you will be looking at a specific paper. You will be annotating that paper, answering certain questions that are posed. Part of what we're doing here is looking at the concept behind antibiotic resistance, but then we're also trying to get that skill of how do you break down and interpret a scientific paper. Think of it in both of those ways. You can read through the overview here, and then you have your instructions. You're going to read this paper at this link. This other link here will give you some information about how to effectively read scientific papers, and then you're going to look at some of the different questions as you're going through the paper. You want to read through the paper once without thinking about those questions, and then go back through the paper. One of the things that I think students struggle with initially is they kind of feel like they should be able to read a paper once and that's it. Even seasoned scientists do not read a paper one time and get the full gist of it. We go back over those papers typically multiple times. In each of the sections of the paper, you want to answer these questions. You're going to do that as you annotate on the actual document. In addition to annotating the paper, you will have a final reflection. In your final reflection, you're going to be tying in things that you've learned for the first 4 weeks into this paper. Go back and think about some of the things we learned in weeks 1 through 4 and relate them to this paper. And of course, you have your grading rubric down here. When you go into this assignment, you will see the actual paper will pop up here and student annotation. You can highlight, and when you put in a highlight, notice over here on the side, it shows me a little note. I can click on that and I can leave a comment there. Another way that I could leave notes is I could come into this text box and then I could just start typing something. What I would do is probably change it to a different color so it stands out. This little icon icon here also is a point annotation. Click right there. I see that is putting a point there, and then I can leave a comment there. So there's various ways. If you want to highlight an area, or you just want a single point notation or a text box, those are some of the ways that you will be doing that. Once you've annotated that, then you can just upload your file and submit your assignment. That's assignment 1 for week 5. Your final assignment in the course is assignment 2, which is your course project. And this is a website submission. When you're looking at the instructions, go back to this course project overview. If we go back in the course project overview, you had your initial description, you had a video explaining what you're doing. You also have each one of these drop downs. So what is the purpose of your project? What audience are you gearing this towards? Overall, what is the project? You have your instructions here for the website. You have a template to create the website, and you're going to have these different sections in your website. What you want to do here is you're going to go back to these assignments that we had throughout the semester. Take a look at your original assignment. Please also make sure that you take a look at any comments that were on your assignment, because you want to incorporate those. And in some cases, it's asking you to add some things from that original assignment. So it's not just duplicating what you did for one of those assignments. You might be also adding to that. So please make sure you take a look at all of the instructions here and make those corrections, and if necessary, add information beyond what you did that particular week. As always, make sure that you include your citations. You want both an in-text citation where you use the information, and you want the full citation in the reference in its APA format. And you want to make sure that some of these are peer-reviewed articles. This website that you're putting together is your final assignment. You'll be using Google Sites to create that. When you click on Start Assignment, this will pop up. Submit your assignment here. Please make sure, go back and double check and make sure if you provide me with a link to your Google site that I am able to open it. So sometimes that link requires permission, so you need to make sure that you set permission so that I'm able to open your link. As always, if you have any questions throughout the week, please let me know, and I can either answer your questions in an email or I can arrange to meet with you virtually. I hope you have a great week.